So recently I've been reading the biography of Walt Disney, and as I was reading this book, it hit me super hard, just all the patterns that I was recognizing that he exemplified in his life, and then all the other lives of the successful people whose biographies I've read in the past year. And actually the second video that I did for this channel and for this blog was on the benefits of reading biographies and autobiographies, and it's just insane. Taking in the entire scope of someone's life and who's very successful in reading that, I think really allows us to think bigger and really just gives you a bigger perception of what your life can become and what you can do with it. So in this video, I'm going to give you guys the 6 patterns that I've recognized recently across 95% of successful people that I've read about. And the first one is that they were very poor for an extended period of time. Now, obviously, this isn't every successful person, but about 95% of them were doing something that was a little bit out of the wall, like out of the basic, and therefore they were poor for like a super long amount of time while they were building things up. And Walt Disney was exactly that. I mean, I got stoked from reading his book because he was, eating cans of beans, sleeping on people's couches. He had like 1 pair of shoes, 1 pair of pants, and 1 shirt. And there's a story from the book where he had to go meet with a businessman about a cartoon that he drew, and he couldn't even go to the meeting. He had to like postpone the meeting because he didn't have his pair of shoes, and he was barefoot, and he didn't have $1.50 to get his shoes from the cobbler. So he had to borrow $1.50 from a friend, get the shoes, and go meet the guy another time. Number 2 is that they failed a ridiculous amount of times before they were ever recognized for their success and before they ever became successful. So something that comes to mind for me is Albert Einstein. That guy, he could not even land a teaching position even after he published his theory of relativity. I think it took him 4 years after he published that for him to finally get a teaching position from a university. The Wright brothers, no one believed that they had flown the airplane. They flew their first airplane in 1903. And it wasn't until 7 years later that they were finally recognized for that. The whole time they were touted as charlatans, no one believed them, and they had to finally go to Paris and fly, and then one of them had to stay in Washington, D.C. and fly in front of a lot of different people to finally show that, okay, they flew the first airplane. The third pattern is that successful people train their craft over a period of many, many years. So with Walt Disney, he was training drawing and animation, and then once he had his studio, he was constantly training the craft of every single person that worked under him, the way that they produce things, their training process, everything. He was constantly refining and training it. For Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was in the gym 5 hours a day over a very long period of time to build his body. And that's just a trait across all successful people, is that they had their craft and they beat on it for years and years and years. The fourth pattern that I've noticed that is always really fascinating to me is that successful people have been publicly shamed and slandered at least once, but most of them have been shamed and slandered many, many times in the media. Whether you're Gandhi or Albert Einstein or Nelson Mandela, it doesn't matter how good of a person you were, nearly all of these people were thrown to the wolves at least once in their lifetime. And I think it's just fascinating. I think our society has a really interesting shaming culture where our media, everything just eats it up. When someone does something wrong, everyone loves to basically just stab knives in that person on a public setting, and I think it's really, really interesting. So the 5th characteristic of highly successful people that I've seen is that they moved to where the opportunity was. So they all were able to recognize that where they were born or where they grew up wasn't where they needed to be. They sought out where that place was, where the action was, and then they promptly moved there. So for Walt Disney, that was moving to Kansas City to do the cartoons, and then it was moving to Los Angeles, California to do the animation. For Arnold Schwarzenegger, that was moving to Graz, then it was moving to Munich, then it was moving to Southern California to be at Gold's Gym. Mark Twain, that guy was bouncing around the whole time, his whole life, was going from East Coast, West Coast, Hawaii, Europe, and this was back when traveling was way more difficult. So they were all moving to get where the action was, to progress their careers and progress their lives. And the last one, the 6th one, is that successful people followed their passion instead of what they were supposed to do. So just like us, every successful person had what they were supposed to do, And that might have been coming from their parents who had a family business, or from their family members, their spouse, their children, their peer group. They were all doing something that hadn't been done before. They were doing something that doesn't have a high rate of success. They were doing something that no one really believed that they could do, even their close family members. And they persisted anyways. They followed this weird passion of animation, of making cartoons, or of becoming a writer, or of running through quantum mechanics and quantum physics theories in their mind all day. And when no one really thought that would amount to anything, and over a period of many years, many failures, many heartbreaks, they finally pushed through and succeeded. So I hope you guys like this video. I hope that this inspires you to read biographies and autobiographies, because they are just incredible, incredible tools that we have. The fact that almost every just insanely successful person has sat down for a year or two or three or four to write down their life story, or they've had someone work on a project for them so that they could then pass that on to the youthful generation as they were dying. Like, all of them are like, I've learned a lot, I've gone through a lot on this planet, and I don't want this to go to waste. I want to share my story, I want to share what I've learned so that the next generation can get there quicker and can escape all the mistakes and painful experiences that I've gone through. So I'll see you guys next week. Ciao.